Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Advent, the first story that we're going to cover this episode, debuted in Dark Horse Presents number 42, which was released on April 24th, 1990. The cover features the sex synth Bella, which was strange to me. I remember seeing that cover weird randomly. I mean, there's no reason why I would see this one particular Dark Horse Presents cover a bunch, but because it was so striking to have this bisected woman who I couldn't remember if I recognized immediately that she was synthetic or not, but it just struck me as weird, this lifeless bisected woman like the Black Dahlia on the fucking cover. This was a light month for Dark Horse. Some of the books they came out with that month included Luther Arkwright, Chevelle Noir, Roach Mill, Zone. So if you needed an alien fix, this was pretty much the only game in town at that time. They also released the Concrete Celebrates Earth Day 1990, which gave you some flashbacks to that one year where suddenly everybody cared about the environment and then completely forgot about it, and we let it slowly die. In the issue itself, there's a Kings in Disguise story by James Vance and Dan Burr, as well as a chapter of the Argosy by Bruce Zick. I'd read credits. I think that the credits in the original issue is solely to Paul Guinan for plot and art, but as I look a little bit deeper into it, it looks like his wife Anina Bennett, who is his co-creator and writer on the Heartbreaker series, also contributed to this story. It was originally presented in black and white, but they colored it for the Dark Horse Presents Aliens one-shot, which is where I was first exposed to. And Xenopedia notes that it's the first expansion telling an alien story that doesn't feature any of the movie characters. I also want to point out too that the story was lettered by Willie Schubert, who I got to meet at Comicpalooza during the 30th anniversary. It's the only time to my knowledge that a letterer has ever been brought to Houston, and I did actually talk to him a little bit about maybe doing a Rolled Spine podcast logo back before he had one, but by and large he wasn't doing hand lettering anymore, not that anybody does, and he certainly wasn't doing it at a convention, and we never got back together on that. So I will mourn a little bit for the missed opportunity to have a Willie Schubert logo. I don't know how many people are going to get hand logos going forward in comics, but anyway, sorry to interrupt. I will ask you too, before we get started talking about the story, you were reading Dark Horse Presents in this time period or no?
See, that's the thing. Like, this is the first time I read this Advent Terminus two-part thing. Like I read Dark Horse Comics Presents, but it was flighty, you know. I remember, you know, I was listening to you and Fryhole talk about AVP. Like I remember that is the most distinct memory I have of it being hyped to death because of Aliens versus Predator. So I remember going out of my way to buy that. I want to say, like, a lot of other stuff, like, it was almost like I was trade waiting for things, you know, because, like, I don't even remember, like, I might have bought issues of Dark Horse Presents after Sin City was a known commodity because they had, like, little one-shots and things like that or something like that. You know, some of those, I remember like, the 100th issue had, like, all these different, I don't know if it was, like, different covers or different stories or whatever it was, but you ended up buying, like, 5 copies of issue 100 because it had a bunch of different content or something. But it was always kind of, you know, depended on what they were really pushing. So I can't say I was, like, faithfully, you know, it wasn't like every, you know, it kind of reminded me of Marvel Comics Presents. It's like there were things that really, you know, I guess engrossed me, and I knew, like, oh, I got to get this Sam Keith Wolverine thing, or I got to read, you know, the Weapon X thing or whatever. But it wasn't consistent. Like once it kind of dovetailed into, you know, I don't know, Deathlock doing something, or, you know, Colossus going off to have a solo adventure or whatever, then I was, like, less, I don't know, committed to the title, right? Like so I think the same thing applies to Dark Horse Presents. So I had never read either of these before, so I can't say, like, that I was a regular reader. I feel like a lot of stuff, you know, even like Sin City, right? Like, I know that started in Dark Horse Presents, but my distinct memory is I picked up, like, the Dame to Kill For stuff, and then I got the trade of the Hard Goodbye, which at that point was just, like you say, you know, it was like Sin City. That's all it was called, right? And you just, you know, you sort of read that trade, and then I didn't have to, I guess, F with, you know, any other backup stories that I wasn't, like, super hyped or clued into, you know, by, I don't know, whoever was publicizing the hell out of it, whether it was, you know, Wizard or Hero or whoever, but so this is kind of the first time I read it. I mean, it's interesting because I looked at both. Like I looked at the black and white and I looked at the color. I mean, I have to say I'm always usually, I mean, I know sometimes there's that pushback against, maybe there's some original vision, that they had with the black and white and that could possibly affect story points and stuff like that. I don't think it did. It's such a short story that it didn't really seem to have that problem to me. And I have to be honest, I think I prefer it's in the omnibus, right? The colored version.
Yeah, it's in the omnibus, and it was originally in the one-shot square-bound Dark Horse Presents Aliens book.
Oh, okay, right, because they reprinted it in like a one-shot with all the different solo stuff. Yeah, so I mean, you
didn't happen to get that one-shot when it came out, did you?
No, I didn't.
And I was curious too, because I know that you were pretty big into Aliens versus Predator. You said you went out of your way to get the individual Dark Horse Presents issues that was a prelude to that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. I remember, I think previews like promoted the hell out of that, and that was something where I was like, oh, okay. I'd like it seemed like you were clued in. Like if you want to be in on the ground floor of this Aliens versus Predator thing, you should get those Dark Horse Presents issues. Like, even though I think didn't they ultimately like reprint them in like a 0 issue or something later? Yeah. But I think I was at least hip enough to previews and all that stuff where they kind of really emphasized like, hey, if you wanna be in on this thing, like get these Dark Horse Presents comics. And I do remember, like, I want to say, like, there might have been some random smatterings of other back issues of Dark Horse Presents I had that were earlier than that, but I feel like that Aliens versus Predator, the 34, 35, 36, like those I think were the earliest Dark Horse Presents issues that I ever bought.
How did you read those on a monthly basis? How did that work for you? Did you feel like you were getting added value by getting those as they were coming out, or were you just frustrated that they were kind of trickling out rather slowly?
I think I was too young to have any kind of, frustration or be super bitter. Like I just thought that to me, like that concept was really cool. I mean, actually it's funny. It's kind of why I said I wanted to talk about this, this 2-part short story, because this is my wacky tinfoil theory that has I cannot substantiate this at all. But I was looking at this and I'm kind of like, it's a so-so story, right? Like they got these, I don't know, this poor man's Indiana Jones who comes in with his crew of people or whatever, but he's a little more Burke than Indiana Jones, and they land on some planet that has a pyramid, and they think they're going to get this great score, and they come in, and then all of a sudden, the aliens are popping out, and the OMAC babe in a box or whatever she is, like gets, torn apart like right away, and all that kind of stuff goes down like immediately in the first segment, right? And they're completely fucked, right? And all I could think of was, is this where these motherfuckers who made the Aliens versus Predator movie got the idea to set it in a fucking pyramid? Like, is this what I have to blame for that movie fucking, being all PG-13 and pyramidy and stuff? Like that's all I could think of, because I was like, fuck, did somebody, because I don't, like I said, I didn't read this. Like, to me, it's kind of a bit of obscura, and I was just like, wait, you mean there were aliens that hunted people in space pyramids before that whatever it was, 2003 movie? Like, I was totally sort of like blown away by that, and I was kind of like, oh, god damn it, like, I'm like, did some exec just happen to stumble upon this and decide, hey, that's a good idea, let's all have it take place in a pyramid, and I was like, god damn it, so because again, I was listening to you and Fryhill talk about the miniseries, the AVP miniseries, and I am definitely on team, this needs to be in, outer space, or this needs to be set in a colony, or what have you, right? Like, and I don't, I was kind of disappointed that they had to, I don't know, set it on Earth and kind of change so much stuff, and so that was one of those things where I was like, who, it's easy to point the finger at, the Hollywood suits or whatever, who, have to make it work for film or whatever they just decide. But also I was kind of looking at this and going, god damn it, is this something that nudged them in that direction, and I was just like, motherfucker. Like, so I was kind of, I had that adverse reaction to the story just on the basis of that, but I mean,
well, I was having having some cognitive dissonance myself because I knew the pyramid was familiar and I was trying to figure out why it was. And it finally hit me that I started this podcast by covering the original early draft version of Alien that was published, one of the last books that Dark Horse put out. And that also involves a pyramid, which is not something that is in place in the actual movie. Of course, a ship in the movie, but in that earlier draft of the script that was illustrated, that's a pyramid. So I think that was probably the first fruit of this some particular poison tree. And then it probably fed into this story potentially. Maybe, I don't know. I back in the 80s, I'm not sure how much access they would have had to early drafts of Alien. So it might have been that this was wholly original to them. But between those two, you can see where AVP got it from. And Xenopedia made a point of mentioning that as well.
That makes sense because Hollywood can't let a quote unquote good idea go. Like if they thought that pyramid idea was a winner, like they certainly like tuck it away and save it for some later movie, which turned out to be AVP, I guess. So
well, thankfully we never got the giant spider alien, so we got that to look be thankful for.
It's weird. Like do you like I know we're kind of making fun of the synth babe or whatever they're calling her or whatever. Like she's on the cover. She gets demeaned, talked down to, or whatever, like throughout the course of the first part before she kind of gets brutally severed into two parts or whatever, right? But the other thing that it made me think of, where I was like, maybe it's naive, right? Because we've had this conversation before where I was like, I don't view Newt as a sexual object of gratification, right? So maybe I'm naive too, or maybe I'm not willing to cross the streams. But that reminded me of Blade Runner very much, like the whole Priss, like the whole kind of I don't know, whatever you want to call it, sex bot, like this whole weird thing that I remember the cover freaked out my mother, the whole OMAC, with the lady in the
I'm sure your mother wasn't the only one freaked out by that image. I think that's a historical fact.
Yeah.
Lots of people were freaked out by that image.
I think every time somebody's exposed to that, I think I was listening to like John and Maggie Schaefer, and like he somehow they ended up like either reviewing that or he showed her a cover to like establish like this is what the old OMAC was like or whatever. And even when I think every woman like has the same, it's what do you call it? It's like genetically, like it's just this genetic reaction where they see that and they go, what the fuck is that? Like, and they're totally like, it's funny because I was like, oh, how did Kirby like it's like, I don't know, like it's not so much like I love the image or anything, but I find it fascinating that it evokes such a visceral response from like, you show it to any woman and they'll have that same kind of like, what is that like thing, and it just, I don't know. And this is not as visceral, I guess, but I mean, it is similar, right? Like, I mean, there's kind of a I'm trying to think of the right word. There's this.
Well, I would say, for starters, a literal objectification to where the women are literally parts and not a whole, not a being that it can afford to be regarded even being put together properly. One of the things I dig about the story in color specifically is that the two characters that are synthesoid or part synthesoid are off color. They have the sort of unfortunate coloring that we would associate in earlier times with ethnic characters. So you've got a literal othering of them, and it's especially a poignant when it comes to the female. It's funny that you're bringing up Blade Runner because obviously there's a lot of shared DNA thanks to Ridley Scott. And I just recently listened to a 3-hour-long podcast, The Projection Booth, always a great show, by the way, where they were talking about Blade Runner and talking about Ridley Scott and the potential of crossing those streams, and in particular how he had worked on Prometheus and he was supposed to work on a Blade Runner sequel that never ended up manifesting after his brother died. And, so it's fresh in my mind thinking about mixing those two properties. It's actually kind of a shame in my mind that Dark Horse never got the Blade Runner rights, because that would have been a great, mingling. But you do get elements of that here. And it is like, I agree with you. I can definitely see the Priss there. But it's also funny because you got broke-ass Indiana Jones, which I think is hilarious, because how many guys, even back in the 80s, that was a cliche. The guy who puts on a fedora and suddenly thinks they're some kind of a badass.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what's funny here is this billionaire is, down his luck, named Willington Frick. And this is going to be his big score. And he's got the media involved to help build himself back up again from, dire straits. And, it's pointed out that this is supposed to be a sex robot specifically. But what's funny is even though she's othered through the weird flesh tone, she's othered on the cover, specifically objectified on the cover. And they have that great shot where the alien rips her in half and she's got the little balls and stuff like Ash. So you're very conscious of the otherness of this character. But she's never, even though she's talked down to and she's mistreated and she's told to shut up and go to response only mode and this kind of stuff, at no point does she ever actually sexualize within the story. And in fact, she is probably the best person in the team in terms of how she relates to other people, the role that she serves, being beneficial to the members of the team, trying to save them essentially by explaining, well, this is what this thing says. They're like, shut up, bitch. I definitely can feel the presence of Anina Bennett in this story because I think both the women have interesting perspectives and they're definitely the more sympathetic of the four characters presented, but most especially the one that is most dismissed, the one that isn't even considered to be a human and deserving of the most basic respects, is one of the better characters in the story entirely. And I do think that's a point. Yeah. We see like some of the worst of men here, but obviously all the human characters are worse than this synthetic being that at least is trying to be the best version of itself and not just a synthesoid bimbo, as one of the mercenaries refers to her.
It's interesting because then the other thing, I mean, I don't know if this was in any original drafts or screenplays for Alien, but you mentioned how, the broke-ass Indiana Jones guy is this, I guess basically washed up, millionaire mogul or whatever. And I mean, that's, there is something similar to the whole Charles Bishop arc in AVP as well, even though this is on a much smaller, this is more of a, EC short story, the pyramid thing goes wrong and you get the gist of everything within these two little short chapters, whereas, they expand that into this whole feature film thing and try to pull the whole thing where what Hammond from Jurassic Park is a sweet old man, whereas I think in the Crichton novel he's kind of like a fuckstick. You know what I mean? Like where you're kind of like, oh well, some of these things don't line up.
The casting is going to impact
who's
on that.
telling the story, right?
Yeah, the casting is going to impact on that. When you hire Richard Attenborough, it's hard not to like the guy. And again with AVP,
and you got the Spielberg.
You're 20 years out from Aliens, and you've got Lance Henriksen. You might as well take advantage of the warm and fuzzy feelings we're all feeling toward Lance Henriksen that may not have been in place for Alien 3, but are definitely in place by the time you get to AVP.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Paquita Trotamundos, not Paquita of the Barrio, but Paquita the Globetrotter. What was your first experience with the Aliens property?
What's a funny thing is that I do remember watching Aliens, for which is the second movie. I really didn't remember too much about the first one, and I never watched any of the other movies. It wasn't until recently, I would say in the last 10 years, I'm guessing, that I actually saw properly pay attention of the first Alien movie, and you liking being one of your favorites, the Aliens. So I got more exposure to that one. Plus, I do remember that one the most. I think we watched Aliens multiple times because it is a great movie. But the first one, I knew the basic of it, but I didn't remember details on it. So I saw it like 10 years ago. Which one is the one that is in the prison?
That's the third one, Alien 3 or Alien Cubed.
Who was the director on that one?
David Fincher.
Okay, so I do remember you and I watched that movie. I think it was because you were trying to expose me of the movies before the comic convention that we...
Yeah, when we went to the 30th anniversary at Comic Palooza.
It's not a good movie, but it had the potential of being a great movie. Everything was there, but I don't know what is about it that it just went to shit.
You're not a big Fincher fan anyway, though, right?
I was about to ask you what other movies that he's done.
The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I know you've seen...
The with Daniel Craig? like.
Yeah.
I did like that one a little
Fight
bit.
Club,
Not too much about Fight Club. I didn't care.
Seven.
I did like Seven, yes.
So not a fan, but not a detractor either.
Exactly. It's not, because it's not my type of movies. This one, it's like I say, had a great potential. It had a great visuals too, especially inside the jail. I don't know. It was something that is missing, and I cannot pinpoint to what it was missing. It was not catching my attention.
I think it's the absence of the characters. You're not really drawn to any of the characters in the movie, so you're stuck with Ripley as the only POV character, the only character whose fate is of a concern to you. So I'm sure that's a problem with the movie.
Yes, and I do remember that I only saw it once. And if you ask me right now what I like about that movie or don't like, or to give you details on that movie, I cannot for the love of me. So is there any other movies besides that third one? I know there's the Aliens versus Predators. I have not watched any single one of them. I love the Predator 1 movie, the first one, but Aliens versus Predator, I don't like that crossover kind of situation. So I did not watch any single one.
Now, if I remember correctly, you and I started watching Alien Resurrection. That was the one by the French director that's a little more audacious, had the main villain from The Crow.
Okay.
And I think at some point after he died, you lost all interest in the movie and you just never went back to it.
If you are giving me a crappy movie that I only want interest of one character or one actor, then I'm gonna stick and once you kill it, nothing else there to keep me there, right? So
Well, I think you literally said they killed the best character.
yeah. So I was just like, okay, well, I'm done. That's it. And yeah, I don't have that many. And now I know there's comics. I learned that from you. I have not read any comics of it.
Have you forgotten the ones we saw in the movie theater?
We saw Aliens in the movie theaters.
We saw 2 Alien movies in the movie theater, yes.
Oh, yes. Okay, so, well, you're talking about Michael Fassbender, right? You put Michael Fassbender at popcorn, I'm gonna be there. Who cares if they're actually good movies or not? I have to say, Prometheus, and what was the name of the second one?
Alien Covenant.
Prometheus, I liked it well enough. Sometimes I catch myself whenever they're showing it on TV, I leave it on. I don't want to say it's too much because of Fassbender, because that hair is hideous. So it's not his best looks. Actually having archaeologists on Earth discovering like all these different constellations from different parts, and then following that, going into space. I like that kind of movies. Now the second one, Michael Fassbender could not save that movie whatsoever. I think I only watched it once in the movie theater. I was so out of it. My brain just erased everything from that movie because I honestly do not remember the plot. What's the Michael Fassbender character's name in the movie?
David, isn't it?
David, yes. Do you remember?
Well, he's actually, you get twice the Fassbender because he's in a dual role in that movie.
It was a twist that you kind of see it coming a little bit. They were planning to make another one.
They were planning to. I think that they've given up on that because there was already a resistance after Prometheus. There were people who really didn't care for that movie. And then the second movie was supposed to bring it more in line with the Aliens movies prior. And people pretty much hated that one too. And it sort of scuttled plans to continue. And now it's going to move to television. Noah Hawley is going to do a TV show for FX, as I recall.
Okay. Like, I don't know what else you can expand on a TV show. We already touched a little bit on the origins and Prometheus. I think on the second one, they went a little bit more with the story. Aliens, and the other Aliens 3, 4, whatever, Aliens versus Predator, is more about the threat of the monster versus the human, the determined human. So we don't care too much about the origins of the alien itself or anything. It's just going to be the perseverance of Ripley or the other characters. So, I mean, what else are they going to do that is just going to sound the same?
Yeah, well, I guess they had the option of doing an internal reboot, but I wouldn't really welcome that. I'm not a fan of retconning movies out of existence, so we'll see what happens. You said you saw Aliens before we were together, and that was the only one you saw before we were together.
Yes, Aliens, I remember seeing it because I do remember the game over, man, game over, and the whole the beginnings of the Michelle Rodriguez character, Vasquez.
You mean the foundation of her career, or basically?
Yes, exactly. So I do have more recollection of Aliens before we met. Now, the first one, no, I did not hardly have any recollection of it.
Yeah. But you had seen it before we met, or you believe that it was after we got together?
I do believe that I saw it long time ago. I mean, that movie is like, what, late 70s?
Yeah, I believe it's 79.
And I maybe remember watching it on the movie theaters, but that movie, you know, when you're younger, when you're little, I love horror movies, but that's not the type of horror movies that I like when I was little. So maybe that's why I just didn't, it was too violent for me, or too grotesque, or too gory for my taste. So maybe that's why I didn't care for it much. When I watched it as an adult, I actually was more terrified. And I have to say that Alien, in sense of human horror, the first Alien is more terrifying than the second one, the Aliens. You have a crew in a ship. There is so much limitation. And that's one of the things that I hate about slasher movies, is that pretty much they put them in like an open field or like in a cabin in the woods and stuff like that. An entire movie, I'm just thinking, it's like, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that, do this. I mean, it's easier for somebody to do it in the couch, right? But for some reason, their logic, it just seemed comical. There's so many options, it's just ridiculous. But Alien, you are in a very small ship in the middle of space. I can think of like 5 or 6 scenarios at sea. In space, once you get out of that ship, of that capsule, that's it. You're gone. Any damage inside that capsule, being the technology inside of it, you miss something out. The whole ship, the oxygen is gone, the heat is gone. There's so many things that can go wrong that you cannot just shoot blind. You cannot just like start chasing with the hatchet and just start like trying to hit it, because then you're gonna hit something that is gonna make you die. So it doesn't matter what you do. Like, you have to be smart. And the Aliens movie, they were more into like a planet, right? Like a...
Yeah, it was like a planetoid. It was just a small planet or a small moon kind of situation.
Yeah, so it is more to like, they have more space to maneuver. They have the docks. And although they have more aliens, but you have places where to hide. I mean, if 10, 5, 6-year-old like Newt or whatever, if Newt actually was able to hide from aliens for like so many months. So there is so many options. So in terms of plot itself, I like the first one better. It is more my taste. Aliens is more fun because of the characters, but it's not more of my movie. It's more violent, more aggressive, more gory. So it is just coming back to whatever, like a slasher movie. If you tell me to choose which one is the better movie, taking aside the heart, I will say Alien.
And how do you feel about the character of Ripley?
Hey, woman power. Because she was smart. She was strategically doing things. He wasn't a crying like, oh my God, I'm so delicate, but I'm going to succeed at the end. No, she was like a motherfucker almost since day one. She was the one who told them. She was the one who tried to say, no, don't do this. Or, you know, she was the one that had the head to succeed. So it wasn't just the fucking machine guns, although at the end was that badass early on. So yes, I love her character.
And what do you think of the alien itself?
I don't give a two rat's ass about it.
Not into the design or anything like that?
No, to be honest, no. They're not scary to me. Now, the face huggers, I would say that that's kind of like one of the things that I might get chills. I have phobia of choking, not able to breathe. And just to think about having this face hugger in my face and not letting me breathe, or just...
and shoving a tube down your throat for the egg.
Exactly. Yes. So that's pretty much my worst nightmares, like right there and just on that image. So I would say the actual big aliens, grown-up aliens, or the mother queen alien, I don't care. The huggers, those are the ones that I can get chills.
So the story we're covering was originally printed in Dark Horse Presents 5th Anniversary Special, released on March 26, 1991, and I inflated the price in a previous episode. It was actually only $9.95, although in $91 that was still considerable, but that was about 5 times what a normal comic book would cost that time period, 4 to 5 times. The book featured a number of stories about characters that had been featured in Dark Horse Comics, including a Martha Washington Give Me Liberty story by Frank Miller and Dave Gibbons, a Concrete story by Paul Chadwick, The American by Mark Verheiden and Dougie Braithwaite, Roachmill by Rich Hayden Jackson and Tom McWeeny. A story called Placebo, adapting a short by Andrew Vox with art by Klaus Janson. The Black Cross by Chris Warner. What I thought was a little bold given the price is that it was The Aerialist Chapter 3 by Matt Wagner, but The Aerialist never seemed to amount to much of anything. It also featured the first episode of Sin City, a seminal work by Frank Miller. Also a heartbreaker story called The Prologue by Nina Bennett and Paul Guinan, who would contribute to other Dark Horse Presents short stories involving the aliens. In that book was also the Aliens vs. Predator epilogue by Randy Stradley and Phil Norwood. The story was printed in black and white. It was colored for the Dark Horse Presents Aliens one-shot, which is how I was exposed to it. That was released on April 14th, 1992 at half the price, $4.95. It seemed a little bit more reasonable to me at that time. It was square bound, 48 pages. There was also a variant platinum edition with less color, so I know the metallic inks are nice and all, but I would rather have the nice bright red logo. This was a 5th anniversary reprint collection of all the stories that had appeared in Dark Horse Presents, featuring just the aliens, but not the crossover ones. It included The Theory of Alien Propagation, the stories Advent and Terminus, which was essentially a two-parter, Reapers, and The Alien, which we will cover at a later date. This was the first time all those stories had appeared in color. It was released the same month as Aliens Hive number 3. It was written by John Arcudi with art by Simon Bisley, and you can tell us a story.
Dark Horse presents 5th anniversary special Reapers. So I am suspecting that these green creatures that look like Martian Manhunter a little bit, those are the Reapers. They start by going inside a chamber. As soon as they go inside, they start getting these creatures, the actual aliens. It is aliens. Which aliens are you talking about? What is the actual name of the aliens?
The story is Reapers. For the purposes of the podcast, just for clarity, we're going to refer to them as Reapers. It's never been clarified whether the green creatures are the Reapers or the larger creature that's going to appear later in the story, but it's going to be easier if we just refer to the green creatures as Reapers. And again, I want to point out that this story was originally in black and white.
Okay, wow, black and white. I think what it adds more to this story is the colors itself. I cannot imagine looking at this in black and white. As it is, I have to actually pass through this book at least 3 or 4 times to kind of make sense a little bit.
They're pretty humanoid.
They look like Martian Manhunter, to be honest. And they have, like, especially the main, I'm guessing what is the main character. It does look like the facial for morphs.
I suppose they've got a simian head. It looks sort of like mandrills or something.
Yes. So they go inside this chamber, what I'm supposed to is a chamber, and the aliens, the actual aliens, they start attacking them. They have heavy machinery. They suffer some casualties. On one of the biggest panels for the story goes the main boss, like the main monster.
Yeah, and again, very difficult to tell what's going on there in the black and white version. I assumed that it was a Giants version of one of those Reapers, but when colored that sort of purplish gray color, I guess that was meant to be an alien queen, but it doesn't look like the xenomorph queen from the movies, so I am not at all... Oh, and it eats one of the face huggers, right?
Yes, it does eat one of the Reapers, and then we can call it for the queen alien, for lack of better term.
Well, maybe it's a drone produced by bursting out of one of the Reapers. I don't know what the fuck that is.
Below this massive alien monster, they do have some egg in there. So is that normal that regular...
An alien queen mother would have eggs. They'd be laying eggs.
So yeah, so that indicates that this one is an actual queen mother because of the eggs.
It's only like 8 pages and they're silent, and yet it's damn near indecipherable what the fuck is going on.
Well, except for the puke, womp.
Yeah, they actually put in sound effects even though it was a painted comic book. Bisley kind of graffitied in sound effects for clarity, I suppose.
Yeah, so one of the Reapers start pointing out at the eggs below the big monster, and then one of them that I'm guessing is the main one because it is one of the first ones that showed up, although they are very similar to each other, so it's kind of distinguished. So one of them is start ripping the egg. At first I thought he was about to eat it because it's just kind of showing it with his face very close to the egg, so I thought, is he gonna eat it? But then one of those small aliens start popping out of the egg. Yes, the face hugger pop out of there, and the Reaper actually eats that. He has like a grinding face, like a smiling kind of face looking at the egg.
They're lipless, right? They have a perpetual grimace. Essentially their teeth are perpetually showing.
Yeah, but this is the first panel that they actually show some kind of smiling green And what I'm guessing is because he actually is happy to see the egg, and then whenever the face hugger pops out of the egg, on the next panel he's actually crunch, he's eating it. And
to these aliens, the xenomorph face huggers are sort of like popcorn shrimp, seemingly.
yes, so, and then one of the last panels in that sense, he's actually getting his tongue out. Delicious.
Licking his lips, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Finish with that, and it seems that they are carrying them, removing a bunch of eggs, and then put them in like in backpack and sacks
Harvesting,
and stuff.
I would say.
Harvesting, yeah. And then on the very last panel, and this is what I have to go back like 3 or 4 times because I was so confused on the last panels. You see like a market where there's reapers, creatures, and they have like a little reapers, and they have immersion, moms buying and stuff like that. And what they seems to be a bunch of eggs, like alien eggs. And then you see like in the background, like all these reapers, the ones that just came back from battling this big alien, bringing the eggs. So I'm guessing that that's what they do. Like they actually extract the eggs because apparently that's a delicacy. I have to say that one of the things that kind of tripped me off of this picture of the market is that you have like this little reaper just pointed out, and it looks kind of scared, kind of like, look. And I thought it's like, wait, are there talking in there too? But then no, I realized that he's pointing at the reaper that just came back from the eggs, kind of saying like, look, fresh eggs or something like that. So yeah, so that's the story.
So I want to read you a quote. It's from an interview that originally appeared in Blast magazine, which is from the UK. I used to have that magazine. I no longer do. What I have is it being reprinted by special permission for Wizard magazine number 3. So this is 1991. It's an interview with the artist Simon Bisley, and I believe this would have been before he painted this piece. He was working on the Batman and Judge Dredd crossover. They came up with the idea of crossovers between properties. And so Bisley says, things like that are what comics are all about. Team-ups are great fun. I don't know about the aliens versus Predator thing, though. Those aliens should have kicked the living crap out of the Predators. The aliens are pure death. I was really disappointed with the way they were done in the second film and in the comics.
Well, maybe the group that was sent in into getting, the group, maybe that was a badass, and Ripley she's a pretty badass person. But even here, you can see in that story, the one that we just discussed, is that they have this massive, on Aliens 2, it's not that they actually fight a mother alien.
Yeah, they introduce the alien mother queen in the second movie.
Yeah, so, and it looks really lethal, and it's just like, it took Ripley a lot of her to actually battle and win. So, and for this guys just to go in and remove the eggs, and it's just, they suffer some casualty too, but they seem that they've been doing it a lot because they do have, on the last panel for the market, they do seem that they have a lot of eggs. So that means that, yeah, they can just go in and out. So maybe these guys, they're more lethal than the aliens?
Yeah, it's almost as though these aliens are as lethal as Bisley perceived the proper xenomorphs to be.
Yes. So yeah, so I cannot once again imagine this book in black and white. It blows my mind.
So what did you think about Reapers?
It's one of those things where there's not much to say about it. The art is beautiful, and it's this little clever John Byrne story. It's like you've got the guys that come in. They I don't know. I think the coloring kind of does it some injustice, right? Like, or disservice, because I don't know that queen is like hulking and purple or whatever. But aside from that, like the black and white, like you come in, there are these kind of weird, I don't know, Corbin-y, Bisley looking dudes or whatever, these aliens. And then the twist is like when the chest burster comes out, they go on their face, the guy eats it like it's a delicacy. And then it cuts to like, these guys' grocery store where they've got, cartons of fucking alien eggs, and they sell them off to little kids and moms and dads and families and shit. So it's ultimately my takeaway from it is, it's that whole, Qui-Gon Jinn, there's always a bigger fish, or whatever. And that's, I don't know what more to say about it is. It's probably, of the 3 you shared with me, it's probably my favorite, but I don't have a whole hell of a lot to say about it. It's clever, it's funny, and it has a effective twist, and that's, the funny part would be, I think, or maybe I think a mistake would be to like, I don't know, maybe Xenopedia has like a whole file on those fucking guys, but like I almost kind of don't want to know anything more about those guys other than they eat alien egg chest bursters as like, you know, appetizers, and that's it. Like I don't want to know their backstory. I don't want to know that they like once, you know, had an adventure with the engineers and did all this other, like I don't care about any of that. Like it's a fun little short, and that's all there is to it.
They're definitely concept breakers. So if this were a superhero universe that's ever expanding, and as you say, there's always a bigger fish, then there'd be room for those creatures. But within the more realistic, grounded milieu of the Aliens franchise, you can never reference.
Yeah, I mean they're the
you know, a good right, joke. Move
they're
on.
The Carnage to the Aliens Venom. They're the Species 8427 to the Borg. I mean that's what that is, and it's just this little fun jokey joke thing, and like I said, that's the end of it. I mean the art's really beautiful, and it's, you know, it's a twist, and it's funny. So, you know, that's about it.
The next story is going to be Countdown. It was in the magazine Dark Horse Insider. This was an 8-page black and white monthly newsletter. It was a giveaway sold in bundles of 100 for $5. The first issue was dated July 1989 and previewed both the second Aliens miniseries and the first Predator miniseries. The third issue previewed Aliens vs. Predator. We're looking at issue 14, cover dated September 1990, which began the 14-part Aliens Countdown story. It continued until the October 1991 cover dated number 27, over a year later. This will also prove the penultimate issue before the magazine took a month off and switched to being a comic-sized edition, which is the one I'm familiar with. I never saw these newsletters in the comic shops. I didn't have comic shop access during the time that this was running anyway. Did you ever see the Dark Horse Insider tabloids?
I don't think so.
Do you remember the comic-sized version?
Yeah, I think so. The problem is with a lot of this alien stuff, the covers look all the same, dude. It's the Aliens logo, really large, with whatever the story is slightly smaller underneath, in the exact same font with an alien on the cover.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you're looking back 20 plus years, I'm not sure if I would just seen the same thing over and over again, or if this was what I saw. Not sure.
I have the same problem with Spawn. After the first few years, every cover is a pinup shot of Spawn, and it's like trying to tell one issue from another gets pretty difficult. For the anniversary of Spawn, I was going to try to do a countdown of the various covers, and I just got bogged down with how samey it all was. And Aliens is very much the same situation, because and Predator also, is because they emphasize the creature as opposed to the humans. It's mostly pinup shots of the creature doing stuff in the darkness. It becomes very rote after a while.
Oh, you mean that Spawn cover with the cape and the chains?
Right. Yeah. So this is the Aliens cover where they're coming out of the darkness with their jackhammer jaws dripping saliva.
I mean, look, great imagery, but I mean, like I said, thinking back, it ain't gonna happen.
It's mostly here's how memories. Arthur Saddam draws an alien. Here's how Kelly Jones draws an alien. Here's how Sam Keith draws an alien. You know, that's the main differentiation, is who's doing it. So when you have somebody like a Dave Dorman that did a bunch of covers, it gets more and more difficult to determine, okay, well, which one was this? Which series was this? What story was this? So did you ever read any of the Aliens comics when they were coming out?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
the only stuff I really even tossed through would have been crossover stuff, like Aliens, Predator, or any of the Batman stuff.
Mm-hmm. And it was mostly just the novelty of seeing the two of them interacting in the same space, but not feeling compelled to actually read the things.
Correct.
We're both new coming into this. I literally read it for the first time last night. I read it in my Omnibus edition. These are some of the rarest Alien stories, probably because they were printed in a newspaper, essentially. Unlike a lot of Alien stories, they've never been colored, and they were never printed by Dark Horse Comics in the U.S. properly, aside from as the newsletter. They made these mini comics, one of which was polybagged with an issue of the UK Aliens magazine, and the other one was bound in. It's black and white, and it's kind of muddy. It's a little hard to actually see what's going on. And even in the edition that they have in the Omnibus, they didn't do anything with it that really helped make it more visually clear. It's actually weird because some of the pages they reprint as more of a gray, and then other ones they really kick up the contrast and make them very dark, rich blacks. But all that does is give a sense of inconsistency inconsistency. For me, this was kind of a frustrating read as a result. It was just hard to see what the fuck was going on.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if we want to talk about this now or not, but also the artist, he doesn't really differentiate between the different characters in the book that well to me. So the fact that it's muddy, I'm having a hard time determining who is talking and who is not talking and who is the narrator, and it was a little muddy.
Because this was put out in single page, and I think at least one is a double page installment, there is sort of like this herky-jerky, somebody's riding the clutch kind of quality to the story. Just to let folks know too, Countdown is by Dark Horse Comics publisher Mike Richardson, and it's drawn by Den Boves, who did the 1989 Aliens miniseries, but whereas that one was in color, this one's in black and white. But what's weird is he started out doing black and white for Warlock 5, and then he switched to color for Aliens and covers and other things going forward. But you'd think he'd have had a familiarity with black and white printing because of his background in that area, but I don't get that here, and I have to assume he was painting in black and white, because why wouldn't you have reproduced the material in color if it existed in color? Like, a lot of the problems I had with the Aliens miniseries are just worse here, and like you said, telling the characters apart, there's a narrator, and basically you have the narrator and everybody else, it seems like. Any one of those people could have been the narrator, and would have made a big difference to me.
Yeah, I will say that for the story, it doesn't really matter either.
Do you want to tell folks roughly what happens in this one?
Yeah, so it is, like you said, a very quick story of 3 Marines, one nicknamed Silk. She's the girl. We have Tom, and then I think the third person is unnamed, right? The narrator is unnamed.
He apparently is named because they had it up on Xenopedia, but until I saw it on Xenopedia, I don't think I caught it either, because they kept throwing out odd random names here and there. Phil Sandberg is apparently the narrator, and I guess you picked that up from one person saying Phil at some point and somebody saying Sandberg at another point, but I don't remember those particular points. So for all I know, it was like in the solicitation copy or something. There's a guy who talks, there's a guy who doesn't talk, and then there's the lady.
Yeah. Well, talks is in we have the inner monologue throughout the whole time. We'd been told that our situation was hopeless, that we might as well kiss the world we knew goodbye. Some of us weren't about to give up so easily. It was Silk's idea to check the building out. She figured the company was somehow involved in bringing the creatures to Earth, and we might find some answers there. Tom agreed. Me, I was there because that's what I was trained for, and because I wanted to kill as many of the aliens as I could before they got me. What happened to me didn't matter much anyway. I was living on borrowed time. And that's basically the theme of this. What is this total? 8 pages or something like that?
I think it's actually twice that. I think it's 15 pages.
Is it? Okay, so it's these 3 Marines on a planet that's sort of just being chucked away.
I think it's actually the planet Earth, because I want to say that this is taking place during the time frame of the Mark Verheiden stories. So Earth has been overrun because of the stuff that was done by that corporation that was playing around with them, and Earth has essentially been abandoned, and the people that are still there in a very Blade Runner kind of turn, they're the leftovers. They're the ones that weren't considered good enough to be taken off-world and were basically abandoned and are stuck with the remains.
Exactly. So in this opening page, they find one person, and they said there's biosignatures all over the building, so they're like, it's either a hive or we got, like survivors in here. And they find this dude, and he's blown his own brains out, and just before committing the suicidal act, has started a thermonuclear detonation that's going to self-destruct and destroy everything within hundreds and hundreds of miles.
And I want to say that was in the first miniseries, so I think this is the same corporation. And I don't know if they ever showed the detonation. I think they mentioned it without showing it, so I think that they're confirming that we don't want to spoil a very slight twist. Well, no, who cares? Ultimately, the detonation doesn't occur. So you're dealing with this countdown clock where they're racing to try to get to safety within the building, but it never actually blows up.
Yep, they come across packs of aliens. Their vehicle is shot by like a bunch of rogue marauders.
Yeah, they call them mercenaries, but you have to be hired by somebody to be a mercenary. So I think it's more like they're scavengers, and it was the poorly chosen words. But also what's funny is when I was reading it in the Omnibus, a couple of pages stuck together, and I was already having trouble with the lack of flow from page to page. But then it was like, wait, they're referring to shit that I must have missed, and I had to go back and find that page. It didn't have a huge impact though, because I went several pages beyond before I realized I must have missed some.
Yeah. So anyway, these marauders, nomads, try and capture them. They're trying to explain like, we got to get out of here, and they're like, shut your pie hole. Then they manage to escape there. They go down into a building. They come across a queen, and they're just like, it's just nonstop alien carnage left and right. Now they're being chased. They go back up topside. They run into a police officer who worked with them, not worked with them, but worked, with the Marines. So he was a friendly.
Well, he basically he recognized the Marines authority, where he also saw the scavengers for what they were, and managed to blow them out of the sky.
Correct.
It's weird because as far as I can tell, he didn't have any sort of enhanced weaponry for the security. So I don't know how he managed to down this craft that they were in or kill off all the guys who were there. And I'm wondering why he isn't the star, because he's a lot more effective than anybody else in the story. If he managed to knock out all the marauders, mercenaries, whatever you want to call them. But he's the one who tells them that there is an underground bunker they can go hide in. Now he's got to go leave. He's going to go into town and tell people what's going to happen so that they can do their best to try to get out in time. And I guess the reason why the Marines don't follow him is because he's probably braced doom. He probably recognizes they're not going to be able to get to a minimum safe distance in time, and he's not willing to just go hide. He's going to, just like he's doing now, where he's continuing to defend the base despite the fact that all the humans are dead at this point. I guess he's also trying to defend his community, even though they're all essentially going to be dead very soon anyway. I also wondered how much community there is, because I'm sure there's been a lot of overflow of aliens into the community from this base, especially if it's Earth during the infestation. He's probably going to go off and die, and they try to make their way to the underground bunker, but they end up coming across another hive, and they're getting taken down. In particular, Silk gets taken out, and she was the one who was like the most effective of them. And she's not shown to die, but since she's knocked out and they're surrounded by aliens, it doesn't look good for her.
As they're counting down, they eventually realize that they would have already run out of time, and the bomb never went off. That's when they're like, wait a second, it should have gone off. And then they start questioning, are we dead? Is this hell? Are we in hell? And it's like, I don't think the bomb went off.
One of the guy who's not the narrator, his head gets severed. His head gets severed by an alien tail, as best I can tell. His head gets ripped off at the mouth, but it's not super clear what caused it. I assume it's the whipping tail.
The narrator says multiple times, I'm on borrowed time anyway, or I don't have much time anyway. It doesn't matter what happens to me, I'm running out of time. And it's just like, yeah, this dude's totally got a chest burster in him. As the team is getting consumed by aliens, he pulls out his insurance policy. And
he had a bomb with him. So as an alien chest burster was coming out of him, which was not a twist because you didn't see that coming, you've never seen an alien thing in your life. That couldn't have been more telegraphed.
Detonates the whole thing.
If not the whole base, at least a chunk of the base, to take out the aliens that were there with him. And clearly he would have taken Silk out too. So everybody's dead by the end of this, essentially. So I think this would have been a nice bonus for a free giveaway magazine. Was intended to be collected. It generally wasn't collected. I think there's a reason for that. It's fine. It's okay. It's like one of the old horror magazines with the little wannabe twist ending. It's fine for what it is, but it's also extremely inconsequential.
Yeah, but I feel like this is something that, like, not to shit on an Image book, I feel like this is the kind of thing that if this was like a Cyberforce book, they would have made it a 4-issue miniseries out of this much content. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was like, I was very happy that this was only, just a few pages over 2 mini issues. And I'm like, yeah, this is how long this should take. This should not take that long. We don't need to get to know all of the characters deeply and what's motivating them. We don't need to know why Silk's there still sticking around. We don't need to know this.
It's funny because you've got enough characterization for a one-off story, a short story. But as you noted, that was the extent of the characterization for a lot of Chromium Age characters that were supposed to be headlining ongoing series and shit.
What do you think about the art outside of what we've already talked about? How it's a little muddy, but just because of the...
I think the things that people liked about Beauvais's miniseries are still present. It definitely evokes the feel, particularly of Cameron's Aliens. I think that it has that, you get that familiarity is I think what's attractive about it. I personally don't find him to be a particularly good storyteller. He doesn't differentiate the characters. There's a lot of hacky workarounds and stuff. Lots of solid blacks. Makes it way easier to knock this stuff out quickly and easily. So for me, when I look at it, I feel like it's pretty lazy, and I'm frustrated by my difficulty in following the action on the page. But I also get why people would like his stuff. I'm not that big of a fan though.
So I'm with you. The storytelling was an issue, but I think that was a combo issue. I think this was as much the writer's fault as it was his fault. You don't ever have the lead character talk, so you don't ever get to see the word bubble come out of his mouth to know that he's the narrator. You just know that he's not Silk because that's the girl. Like the other, you're not really sure which the other two guys is him. I think if he had some speaking lines, this would clear up some stuff. But his xenomorphs are fantastic, dude. I mean, he's drawing the movie Xenomorphs. I mean, I think he did really great. No artistic license on them, which maybe you can kind of cap on him a little bit for that. But anything having to do with Xenomorphs in this book looked fantastic.
Well, and I think that's part of what people love about him is that they want to see him accurately represent the weapons, the aliens, the armor, and he does do that. He definitely does painstaking research to make sure he's as accurate as possible in representing what we saw in the movies.
Yeah, but I mean, like even when they're blowing up, he does really great, like lighting effects around it. So he did a great job. It was better than I was expecting when I saw the total page count between these two. I was not expecting much at all, but I thought it was pretty good, man. But again, story's a little hard to follow. And again, that's the second issue, at least from what I'm reading, where it's like really, really dark blacks, like you said, where the contrast is bumped up. It's like nearly all black ink, right? Like, so I definitely see the criticisms more in the second issue than the first issue. That's more the grayish tone.
Yeah. Well, and that part of that's the reproduction too, because you're looking at the mini comics, and the UK books weren't really known for their quality of reproduction, you know.
Yeah. The panels where the tail is whipping through that guy's head is freaking gnarly. When the chest burster comes out of the narrator's chest, it's gnarly. It kind of surpassed my expectations a bit. So
I
was
like the
happy with
covers. They were both reproductions, but one was a little scene piece. I think it was a tip-in plate in one of the hardcovers or something. The other one was a reproduction from the second miniseries. What'd you think about seeing that work in color?
I think they're both nice. The more I look at the second one, it's a little less detailed than I thought it was originally, but just because there's like body parts flying everywhere from the explosion. But when you look at the actual body parts, there's not really anything to write home about. No, I think they're fine.
I feel like you're going to have opinions on Countdown.
You know what? Like Countdown, like I feel like, because I never read that before either, right? Because I told you like my Dark Horse Presents kind of thing was spotty, and I think this had nothing to do with Dark Horse Presents, but it was like some kind of UK publication. So like it's almost like this missing short story that somehow ties into, you know, I quote unquote my favorite, you know, Dark Horse Aliens miniseries, but it feels like kind of like an irrelevant story. And I feel like in those audio adaptions I was listening to that were done on YouTube, those fan audiobooks, like I think they covered this, and it's like I think the novel must have incorporated this into it, because I felt like I heard the same three, you know, it's like I don't pay attention to the guys' names, but it's like there's three people, and in this one of them, the girl's name's Silk and whatever, and you know, but then I think later in that there's another three people that come in and see those three people, so it's like the whole you know, the James Carpenter's The Thing, and then there's the prequel where it takes place before it. So it's like, I mean, if you want to be like super impressed whether things line up or not, like I guess you can, but I mean, you know, I don't know, it just felt like, I mean, I guess it works because it's just supposed to be a short that came with this magazine, so it's like you're not missing anything from the story if you've never ever read it, like I never have. But I guess maybe it's supposed to be like this extra frosting or sprinkles or some shit on the cake that, like, if you have read it, you're like, oh cool, I know what happened, you know, to three other assholes before the other three assholes came in the front door there and did their thing, you know, like that was, again, like not really insightful, not a whole lot to say, but I mean, it just seemed like it was one of these, you know, it's a bonus, it's a side story, and it's you're not, you know, you're not missing anything super important if you've never read it, and it could be a nice little, you know, extra, you know, I don't know, boon for you if you're like, hey, I know about that story and it ties in or whatever. But other than that, I don't know that I see a whole lot of, you know, it's definitely never going to be up there and like, oh, this is like my favorite alien story ever. You know, it was just kind of like, okay, it's just some extra stuff that to me ultimately is, you know, it's kind of irrelevant, you know, like it's like telling, I don't know, you know, it's I don't know, to me it's almost like those sequels and prequels and sidequels and whatever that to The Walking Dead, you know, like it's kind of like, yeah, we know they all get eaten by zombies, like let's move the fuck on, you know, like that's, I mean, I don't know, like maybe that's like not that's probably not the best thing, like if you're supposed to be like, oh, this is an aliens podcast, rah rah rah, but I just feel like that particular story just seems like excessively irrelevant.
It's definitely self-aborting. You are introduced to a group of characters that are all dead at the end, and it's worth noting the exact same thing happens. They're basically, these are two of the same story. They're the specific circumstances are different, but it's almost the same number of people. A little bit more gender equality, but not really, because Belle is taken out fairly quickly. So it's two guys and a girl. They go into a place they shouldn't have. They all get killed. and then nothing that happens matters in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, unless the actual story mechanics really grab you, there's not a lot to it, and especially if you're looking at the broader universe, it is a trifle.
Yeah, I mean, there's no kind way to put that. It's just kind of like if you've never seen it and you do like the Aliens miniseries as much as I do, I mean, it's the same art, right? Like you can kind of bask in the glow of that and kind of go, oh, this is nice. I mean, what's weird about that, and maybe why I'm so quick to dismiss it though, is I think, unless I'm mistaken, like that's always been in black and white. Like no one's ever colorized this story, have they?
That's right. For some reason, this one was just abandoned. It never got into any of the Dark Horse omnibuses. The only time it was in the newspaper that Dark Horse put out, and they did reprint it in mini comics in the UK. But the first time it was available in the United States, because I think the UK magazine was available to order, if I remember correctly, out of preview. So that might have been a way for people in the States to get it, even though the magazine was specifically for the newsstands in the UK. I think the specialty markets still had access to it in the US. But aside from those mini comics, and like no matter what, it's a bad presentation. If it's on newsprint, the cheapest newsprint, that's not going to be a good representation of the artwork, and it's produced for that particular venue. If you do it as a mini comic, that's not a great presentation. And even getting in the omnibus, like I got it, they weren't able, I guess because of the nature of the art, they weren't able to really make it consistent looking. Some pages are gray, some pages are black. It's rough looking. So even in the most optimal presentation, it still comes up a bit short. So it is this weird little curiosity off the side. Not much missed seemingly either, even though, people like yourself are really big fans of that particular artist's interpretation of the Aliens universe. But even taking that into account, it's not the best example of his work on the property.
It's not in color. It doesn't, like you say, the presentation doesn't really hold up very well. So it's almost like one of those things where it's kind of, you can see why it wasn't followed up on, why it's somewhat easily dismissed.
And you'd think you would have at least gotten into, if I recall correctly, they did the 30th anniversary oversized fancy hardcover edition of the 89 miniseries. You'd think that would be a natural place to put that story, but once again, Dark Horse gave it a pass, and instead, I think they printed Earth War in that one as well, instead of continuing with the Beauvais stuff. So that was a choice. I don't know if Mike Richardson wasn't happy with his writing on it, or again, maybe it was just the production issues. But yeah, if somebody chose not to have that back in print after 93 or whatever was the last time that thing was in print before today.
I wonder if it's like one of those things, like sometimes they have these, like in Gundam, Tomino has like an episode where it never aired in the States because he's embarrassed by the animation quality and presumably some of the story points or whatever. So instead of having like all 43 episodes, like in the States, we only got 42 episodes because he's sort of, I don't know, like, it's to him, it's like the Star Wars holiday special or some shit. Like he wants it buried and forgotten. Like I wonder if Mike Richardson felt this, or somebody like in that, position of authority to do something like that kind of went, this is a He-Man comic in the back of the package. Like this is embarrassing. Like we don't need this. Like let's sweep this shit under the rug or something. Like I don't know. Maybe that's kind of what's going on here.
Yeah, I started off with the best of intentions, and 14 months later, we're just wrapping this shit up.
Yeah.
Terminus features Zorn on the cover, another cool image that's reflected in the interiors as far as the resolution of Zorn's interaction with the aliens. Dark Horse Presents number 43 was, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, released on July 1st, 1990, which means that it was 3 months late. And at first I was like, well, maybe there's a mess up. Mike's isn't always perfectly on the dot. But if you look at month to month, Outlanders, the anime or sort of manga reprint series that was coming out at the same time, they managed to get their issues out like they're supposed to, and that gap is not accounted for with Dark Horse Presents. So I guess it maybe did run really, really late. The same month was AVP number 0, the collected edition of the Dark Horse Presents Prelude stories, a one-shot for Duckman, one of those forgotten properties of the 90s animation-wise, the first issue of Hard Boiled, and the Predator trade paperback. In this issue, we have the one-page story by Guy Davis titled The Dawn of Angst. We have the story The Tale of Yakub Cube and the Vulture by Sam Bennett, and another chapter of the Argosy by Bruce Zick. What do we think about the idea of the mercenary character Emil Zorn, who is apparently a cyborg and it's like part human, part synthezoid? Is that, have we ever seen that in any of the Aliens media, the popular media, or is this a comic book thing?
The only thing I can think of is, and you've done a really good job at covering a lot of these, because I don't think these were at the forefront of my mind, but now that you've been talking about them, the thing I immediately think of is he's a Kenner toy. You know what I mean? Like he's got that extra, ooh, look, this colonial marine has a silver arm and has these extra, mechanoid parts to fight the aliens, type thing. I mean, it's not the same, it's not a one-for-one conceptually, but I mean, I feel like it's not completely unheard of that you're thinking about, I don't know, fortifying your security detail with people that have mechanized, increased strength or what have you when you're going on these kinds of expeditions. Not that they know they're going to run into aliens in this story, but I mean, certainly in the Kenner toy line storyline, they're totally like, we're the colonial marines, we're going to go out and mess up some aliens or whatever. So that seems to be something that is, I don't know. This must be a precursor to that, but I think it's there. I mean, I kind of feel like that character does things that you might consider in terms of, I don't know. For me, it was the easiest one to put myself in the shoes of in terms of a choose your own adventure, like where you're like sitting there kind of going like, oh, like wouldn't you try to fight off the alien? Like, wouldn't you try to, stop it from, and I don't know, like it makes me think of like, I the end sequence basically where he's like, you're not so fucking tough, and then obviously if you're a member of the audience and you're steeped in alien lore, you know what's coming once he cracks open the alien and the blood squirts all over him. But he just thinks he's, like, hey, like, it's that kind of thing, like where you're like, oh, like who gives a shit about Jaws? Like, I'll just punch it in the fucking nose. But then you punch Jaws in the nose and it turns out it's got like, acid for blood and your fucking hand like melts off, and it's just like, that's just another facet in this lore where you have this overwhelming sense of machismo get obliterated by the xenobiology, I guess. I don't know, like it's just one of those things where, if you I don't know, if you had somebody with like super duper prep time, right? Like, yeah, you could probably come up with something, but in that heat of the moment thing, like it's kill or be killed, and then you try to kill, but guess what? This thing is biologically designed so that even if you kill it, you're going to end up getting killed as well.
Well, they did a nice job with letting you know this is the only ever survivor of an alien chest burster, and even though they were able to replace his torso, he was like, no, I want you to replace all my limbs, so I'm only 15% human, and set up this ultimate badass situation, just like they did in Aliens, where, as you know, that means you're just going to get fucked that much harder, and they're going to show just how little you can do against the aliens once it actually comes to. I wonder how porous the membrane was between, was it Hasbro or Kenner? Anyway, I think it was Kenner, between the toy company and Dark Horse, since Dark Horse was the ones who were actually producing the comics. And certainly when you look at G.I. Joe and Transformers, the comic book end of it did have a lot of impact and influence on what was done with the toys, but also it might have just been the environment, because as we mentioned, Blade Runner would have been an obvious antecedent to this. Terminator would have been an obvious antecedent. So whether they were taking directly from the Dark Horse influence being right there producing their comic books, or it was just the times, it makes sense. But I also like that with Zorn, he's very much that performative misogyny, that performative machismo, reminding me of like Andrew Dice Clay. I feel like this character is a commentary on a lot of those 80s swaggering assholes that were, if anything, becoming more outsized going from the 80s 80s into the 90s and making a big fuss about how tough they were and how they weren't going to be talked down to and back talked and all this kind of bullshit, you know. He's like Johnny Regressive over here. And I think that's the point of him being in the story in the first place. They're setting him up to be somebody major and then just knocking him right the fuck down again because he's no better than anybody else when it comes to a confrontation with the aliens, no matter how well armed or mechanically armed he is.
Yeah, and it's different from, say, a character like Ripley, right? Like it's, you know, that's something where they you know, she's forced. She has no other choice but to go back and face her fear and revisit the aliens again. But this guy, I don't know. It just seems like, you know, I don't know, if it was me, right? Like, and you were a survivor of that, you might, you know, have a second thought about, you know, I don't know. It just seems like, you know, again, like you're talking about that whole kind of, it's like machismo to the point of stupidity, right? Like that it's like, you know, to me, I mean, yeah, it's like there might be a call and a place for some of that in this kind of environment, but then basically when it leads you to your death, like that's when it's kind of like, okay, this is ridiculous, right? Like it's, you know, if he was just hanging back and blowing guys away and staying away from the acid blood, then you'd be fine. But you know, it's like that you know, he's not all that in a bag of chips, right? Like he gets, you know, crept up on. There's too many of them, and then he's sitting there wrestling with it, you know, and it's, you know, I mean, obviously that's the wrong move, you know.
Well, I'm sure he has that chosen one syndrome. He's the one survivor. And so to him, that means there's something special about him. And it's not just a matter of dumb luck. It just feeds into his pre-existing ego. And as you pointed out, well, instead of learning the lesson of having gotten suckered by a face hugger and, you know, produced a chest burster and somehow by some fluke surviving, he doesn't learn from the lesson. He repeats the same mistakes and he's fucked for it. So again, it's just all about that hubris.
Yeah, and then I think, you know, I mean, I don't know. It's probably no secret, right? Like no one survives this expedition. Like they all backstab one another. You know, whether it's, you know, you start with the, you know, the synth babe who's like one of the first casualties to get ripped apart, and then, you know, you've got Zorn, right? But then it's like you've got what Wellington Frick, you know, is trying to pull a Burke and get out of there scot free, but then the camera woman's disgusted by it and smacks him on the head, right? But I mean, she's kind of just as bad, right? And then she ends up making it back to the ship, and the notion is she won't be able to take off of the ship anyway, but there's an alien waiting for her. So it does to me have that very, you know, that EC horror kind of vibe where it's like everyone, you know, gets their comeuppance, and there's even that whole weird cyclical ending where some other ship lands and is like, well, these guys don't want to share, we can take care of them, you know. And it's just like, well, it's almost like you're like, here we go again. Like all these guys on this other ship think they're the special ones, and they're gonna, you know, get something out of this lost pyramid. They're gonna get their treasure, but instead, all they're gonna find is death and betrayal and treachery, right? Like, so, you know, it just seems like that's one of those things where, you know, it does have that, you know, I don't know, EC horror, Night Gallery, Twilight Zone, like whatever you want to say, like it's got that kind of ending where you're like, oh, this is just going to keep happening until, you know, I don't know, until somebody smarter and less greedy comes along.
It's a definite indication that there's nothing new under the sun, because as you pointed out with this story, and we've seen it in other stories related to aliens, the EC influence, but also they're raiding an Egyptian temple. This is going back to the Mummy, and you see it in Prometheus too, though. So it's new takes on things we've been through before. It's funny to see these novel takes, and also the more divorced we are from the original point of origin, somebody who was watching Prometheus in, what was it, 2009 or whatever, wouldn't necessarily recognize the influence of Boris Karloff movies from the 30s. But you see this midpoint here, and it's much more overt. I don't ever fret for coming up with more alien stories and more takes on aliens that we haven't seen before, if we're going to do like a TV series or something, because there's never a finite amount of stories. There's all the stories in the world to draw from and remix. You can always find some new angle, some new influence, but ultimately there isn't really anything new. You go digging for a thing that people have forgotten about or haven't done anything with for a while, and that's where your novelty comes from, is the forgotten angle, the reviving of something that nobody remembers their history, so you take full advantage of that creatively. You were talking about the color earlier and your preferences for color. Like, I like the first miniseries in black and white as it was intended by its creators. I think that despite very much having that Turner Classic Movies Turnerization look to it, you need the color in the Bisley story for it to fully make sense. I had trouble following that story without the color. And I have to say, too, Paul Guinan was never an artist, though, I would have gravitated toward back in the day. I liked the flashy guys. I liked the image guys. He very much was not that. But looking at his story as an adult today, I really appreciate the artwork in Advent and Terminus. I like that these are real people that look like real people. I'm pretty sure there were some models being used for this. That doesn't always work for me with some creators or some properties. Sometimes I want that idealized image as opposed to a photorealistic take. And again, he's not doing like the heavy rendering and stuff, but these clearly seem to be people modeled off of real people. And in Aliens, where I think it works very well, I like that they are human, and I like I don't know if he's like doing high contrast photographs for some of the stuff he's doing with the pyramids, but I like the contrast between what's clearly drawings and what appear to be photocopies. I like the way he renders the hieroglyphs. I like the skulls. I like everything about the art on this story, and I think it really serves Aliens specifically well. I don't think Guinan does a lot more work within Aliens, but I do think that it's a good job here. This was definitely, I feel, the best of the stories that we're covering in this episode, and I did like too the socio-political qualities that I'm presuming that Anita Bennett contributed to heavily, given that a lot of it does seem to be related into gender, but despite the fact that most of these people are bad people doing bad things and coming to bad ends as a result.
Yeah, I mean, the art itself, I think, is something to behold. I do like all the, I don't know, there's a mood, there's an atmosphere, there's layers to the shadows and the shade. Like, you do feel like you're in the environment that you're supposed to be in, this pyramid that wouldn't necessarily be well lit. Like, I think my favorite piece in the whole thing, I give a call out to Ryan Daly again. Like, if I was gonna go gaga over a piece of original art in Advent Terminus, it would be the Advent page where the synthezoid babe gets ripped in half in the second panel, but even there's a nice, it's a double page splash, and on the bottom, well, not a splash, but a double page spread, and the you've got Zorn there, shooting the alien away, and then her kind of discarded torso is falling to the wayside and everything. Meanwhile, you can see the light is coming from the camera woman. Like, that's the only light that's really coming from the entire location. So it's I think that's and the light that he's got on his machine gun, basically. So I think that's like one of my favorite sets of pages in the whole thing.
Well, and it's probably the only time where you get all the characters, you get a full body alien, to borrow your term, the member berries, with her having all the parts like Ash would have when he's ripped in half. If I were playing the game, I would definitely probably find myself with the same 2-page spread if possible. So I guess since we only get a page apiece, we'd have to like do a timeshare on it or something. It won't end with one of us killing the other one or anything like that.
We're not.
Don't worry, it's just a Paul Guinan. We'll be fine.
Smacking anyone in the back of the head with a camera, a VHS camera from 1980 or whatever. Like, these days it'd be like a drone that's like the size of a walnut or something. But back then it was the VHS camera.
And it is very funny too. It's one of those things where no matter how much of a futurist you want to be, there's always that thing you miss, and it's almost always down to things like miniaturization. We're always trying to keep things the same size or go bigger when clearly everything has gotten smaller and more convenient. Like, I still struggle with the idea of, like, I want to get a camera and record things, and it's like, just get a iPhone. Right. That people are shooting movies on iPhones now. Who's the fucking idiot running around with an actual actual full-size camera and shit, you know? And even me, you know, even if I'm doing a digital camera, it's going to be a fraction of the size of the thing that she's lugging around. So I guess that thing like can actually shoot an alien. Like maybe there's a gun in there somewhere, and that's why it's so damn big. I don't know how in universe you explain the existence of this thing. Maybe it's built for all environments and can go underwater and everything else.
Yeah, there's something, or maybe there's a mother DOS prompt in the VHS camcorder.
The guy's trying to get into a fist fight with an alien, and as you said, predictably, the blood starts raining down, and he you know, gives himself an acid bath. That looks cool, and it was a fitting in for that asshole anyway, so definitely dug that.
I think the Indiana Jones wannabe guy too, like that's the perfect end for him, because his fedora is finally knocked off and he just looks like a schmo, and you see he's screaming like a little girl when the face hugger is jumping towards him and everything. And that, you know, it's interesting because like there's something to be said, right? Like there's something about that image in black and white, but I think it also really pops on the color version with a lot of this stuff, like the way it's offset with like the light blue, and you can really see the face hugger like just pop out at you. And I kind of liked, you know, when the camera woman gets taken out, how they color that all red. Like it almost reminded me of the Creepshow segment, The Crate, you know, how they stick Adrienne Barbeau in the crate, and it's like it's just some unseen thing that's obscured is like mutilating the hell out of her. And like that's basically like you kind of just have to use your imagination, right? That there's this alien in the ship, but they don't actually show you what's going on, but you could see like sort of the I don't know, end results of the shrubbery getting stuck in the wood chopper, so to speak, right? You can see that the aftermath of that, all the kind of woodchucks and leaves just flying all over the place. And in this case, it's just, you know, blood and bone and whatever it is, flesh getting, you know, ripped all over the place and everything. So I think that works really well with the colors.
It's fun because in black and white, it's very Warren, and in color, it's very epic illustrated. But by the way, it feels very late 70s, early 80s. And I think that's a good vibe since that's the origin point of Aliens anyway.
Definitely.
21st Century Boys, AJ Ducky, Andrew R., Between the Pages blog, Billy Hines, BotTalk.com, CH, Canoes, who added thanks, Chris A. Field, Otherverse Games, Chris Dunford, Chris Lydon, Krista, Dear Watchers, a Marvel What If podcast, Del Dracula, Doc Strange, Dirk Ashton, who added thanks, RSP, Ed Moore, Gregory Litchfield, The Hammer Strikes, Geeky Stuff and Voiceover, Hello Berlin, Slowly Descending into Madness, History of Comics on Film, Ian Keith Thomas, I Was Joe is Totally 80s, Jeffrey Brown They Them, King Dinosaur, Kirk Spencer, Lamar the Elf Revenger, Lucretia, Mike It Send Aliens to Me, Moose the Hobo with the High Kick Matson, Ramona's Power Hour, Richard Dent, Right Between the Eyes podcast, Ryan Daly, Sensational Gus, Siskoid, Spacebox 189, Tim Stevenson, Tora, Oofta, VHS Killer, and Wonder Woman Warrior for Peace podcast.
This has been a Rolled Spine podcast. All audio samples are believed covered under fair use laws. No copyright infringement is intended.
Coming in January, Aliens Genocide with guest Ryan Daly.